All right, Socionics sports fans. So we had a double feature tonight in World Socionics Society. So here we go. Let's just jump on to the first one. Okay. So let's see here. Whoops. Let's kind of back it up. Egg it up. All right. And let's go.
Um, it's going pretty good, I just finished my first week back at college. I'm in my dorm right now, so kind of what's going on with me. Very exhausting week, except for Thursday, which is delightful. Um, it's one of those completely empty days where you don't have anything, any classes, and then it's sandwiched in between 2 days where it goes from 9 to 6, so that's great.
Wow, that is intense. What
It's
what
okay.
um what are you majoring in?
I'm majoring in, okay, so I'm double majoring in biology with an emphasis in pre-med and criminology.
Woo.
And yeah, I'll just go with that.
Okay, that's cool. And no wonder it's so intense. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I had
And I
tuned
did
in somewhere
philosophy.
around
It was
here.
like, I don't know, 8 hours a week. It was a real DOS, really. But okay. So I know it's crazy when if you do a humanities, it's amazing. But okay, so what made you want to do that? Biology, pre-med with some, is it criminology, did you say?
Yeah, criminology, believe it or not, has nothing to do with crime. It's just sociology with, a crime kind of spin on top of it. But biology is actually a lot more interesting. I really love biology. You're able
Okay,
to
hold on.
kind of,
Hold on. Sorry, cut you off in the middle of biology. All right. Some things that were standing out to me at this point when we got started. Her speed and pace of her answers and how she's responding. Um, it's not definitive of anything, but it is common characteristics that you kind of look for. This is kind of useful for people who are more experienced in typing. All right. So if you're very new to typing overall, um, then this is just something you're going to have to build over time. Uh, you're just going to have to build it over time. But for the meantime, you can kind of take the word of some people who've been around longer. She's speaking and responding quickly. Doesn't no hesitation really. She's fairly emotive. Just kind of fast, very lively. Um, and that kind of already starts to make you lean towards some extroverted types. Again, not definitive, but a useful tidbit. And then she's about to do some more very NE giveaway stuff to me in the next few moments as she's talking about criminology, what she wants to do, biology, and all these other things. Here we go.
figure out the secrets of the world. Kind of like chemistry. Chemistry is similar, but then again, what matters more than inorganic things is organic things because they're the things that can actually feel and be affected by the world. So that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool pathway. I want to be a correctional psychiatrist. So it's a very long pathway, and I chose that on purpose.
So notice that right off the bat, speaking rather quickly, it's getting more of an NT vibe. She's about to mention that she really likes school and so on a lot, which is not necessarily an NT thing. In fact, many NTs don't like school, but she's talking about liking school. She's talking about a wide variety of subjects that she's very interested in. It's the subject that she's interested in. It's coming across more like a thinker um, that just likes to think. They just enjoy different topics and subjects to kind of explore and play with. She just mentioned like three different things that she's tinkering around with. She's talked about biology already, double majoring with criminology, two things that are not really linked in any way. Um, and then she's talking about psychiatry is something that she maybe wants to go into down the road. These things really are not even that linked together. So you're seeing three separate subjects, 3 separate disciplines that she's curious about, highly interested in, taking a major on. So you're getting a strong whiff of NE already kind of coming at you.
Because I really love school and I love doing schooling, no matter how, burnt out I might feel. I want to go to medical school, like that whole long pathway. It's just, it gives me a lot of structure in order to base my life off of.
Sense. And
could like structure, something that a lot of NTs can lack.
What made you want to go down,
especially alpha NTs?
Well, it kind of started in 8th grade. I think, I was looking at it, and prison, well, it's one of those jobs that people don't really want to do. And yet it's got a really fascinating pathway. So it's really beneficial to society. There's not a lot of people going into it. The pathway itself, just, science is really cool. I wanted to make sure I was busy. But going into medical school, it's one of the least, as far as I know, as far as I remember, it's one of the least competitive specialties, psychiatry. And then, of course, correctional psychiatry would be extremely not competitive, because there's only 20 correctional psychiatrists to 220 prisons in the United States.
Which, that is a bonkers statistic. Holy crap. You feel bad for your penal system. Good God. Anyhow, she's showing very good TE right here as well. She's knowledgeable about these different career paths, how these different things kind of work. She's done some of her homework on that, showing some good TE to understand how this is working. So you're seeing plenty of NE. You're seeing a nice, healthy dose of TE now coming into the play. So that's giving you NE as a possible dominant function with a good dose of TE that could be a demonstrative function. Still sounds very much like a rational to me, and something that, in my mind, the way I was viewing her from the start and even onward, was she came across as an alpha quadra type, in the sense that alpha quadra is known as kind of the childlike type. She has a certain childish naivete, like a certain I'm excited to explore these topics. This is fun to me to explore this, like someone who's very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Again, no offense of alphas or any of that stuff. It's just how I kind of see it. So to me, that's why I'm right away feeling like here is the makings of an ILE, and that's kind of what I'm sticking with pretty much throughout.
So, you kind of have it's not competitive or as competitive.
Oh, she's talking not competitive. So she's kind of researched the field and figured out, okay, which directions do I want to go into? What do I want to work in? It's not competitive. So you don't want something that is highly competitive or highly prestigious. There's a reason why people don't go into those fields. It's, for one, it's not very prestigious, and it's not very competitive. So it's not a lot of glory down the road when you become one. What's the glory in that? None. There's a few different ways you could take that. To me, at this moment, I took that as kind of a lack of SE, or very low SE. You're not interested in the fight, the struggle, the competition. You're not interested in some kind of a great impact. You're not looking for a career path where you're going to struggle because you want the glamorous, cool job out there. You actually went for a different direction. You could possibly look at it as a Delta Quadra type who wants to do something good for a small minority of people that don't get any attention, and you're concerned for that small minority. Later on in the interview, that pops up and that becomes a thing. And Jack starts to explore that particular route. But up to this point, it's kind of strong ILE as I saw it.
But it's also like really intellectual, and it allows me to to really exercise my brain and do a lot of stuff.
That's interesting because yeah, it's not about status. It's you're working with people who almost prisoners, and but there's an intellectual challenge component there, which seems to be a key motivator for you.
Intellectual challenge, very
Thank
NT
you.
type of thing.
Let me see. So how do you like to go about learning new things?
Let me think about that. In class, what I really like to do is I like to be doing something with my hands while I'm listening to something else because I get really fidgety. And so I really need to be doing multiple things at once. And so that really helps taking down note taking. There's so much data on it, but it helps a lot. When I am learning things, I do
Data
try to
on note
slot it
taking.
into my
That sounds like some
puzzle,
NT stuff.
like a world, world view, but like just like a jigsaw puzzle of how the world works. And every day when I'm walking into class, you just get like this. It's mind blowing. Like every time some little piece of information just like slots into it, and it's perfect.
She did do that a lot where she would make a comment like that, like information slotting into something, which sounds like possibly a TI thing, somebody who is trying to construct a system, a frame, similar to like constructing a Socionics eight function model, and you want everything to fit in a spot. You're trying to organize where everything goes in your mind. She made comments like that a lot. That does kind of make you feel like, oh, okay, that sounds like a lot of TI-ish thing going on there too. But up until this point, which is about 5.5 minutes in, you're getting, at least to me, I'm seeing a very strong NE and thinking going on. A lot of it. I got good flashes of TE. I'm getting hints of TI going on. And I'm seeing a lot of NE. She had so many subjects and topics, and she continues to bring up a lot of different things that she's interested in. She's pretty consistent on that. Where things get kind of weird with her a little bit, and by weird, I just mean not so stereotypical ILE, is that she has strong grounded values and some practical skills and interests in things. And so throughout the interview, you're trying to sort of figure out where that's coming from. That was something that Jack was working out, and I think he does a really good job of working it out because she was kind of complicated. So I think he does a really good job of teasing that out of where these values are coming from. Is this actually FI that I'm seeing, or is this just because of where you came from? Right. So anyway, let's carry on.
And let me see. So it was very okay. I'm not going to ask you directly about it because you didn't want to be asked about it. I was reading through your pre-diagnostic questionnaire, and you said that you didn't want to be asked about religion. So I'm not going to ask you about religion. But what I am interested in is the reasoning you gave in that, which was that you don't want to be asked about something that you aren't ready to take a strong stance on. You don't want to have to, feel like public you can commit to something you're not actually ready to do that. So what is it about? How do you reach the level where you are then actually comfortable to take a position on things in general?
Very good question.
Well, when I'm completely comfortable with taking a position is when I've looked at the counter arguments and the arguments for it, and I figure out, okay, if I'm supporting this, then I have a good stance on it. I can kind of go against the counter arguments, and if it's a position that I'm going against, then I want to make sure that I have, why I'm going against it. Religion is such a massive topic, so there's that, which is why, like, I didn't want to go into it because I've had typing things where we went in, it was excruciating. Excruciating, like 5 hours long, just like getting interrogated over it. Not fun.
Dear, no, still on that.
Yeah, not fun.
Okay, let's pause it. 5 hours long. What happened there? Anyway, so I think this is something that for some people they might find this kind of strange because you might have the impression that ILEs and other NTs would not shy away from any kind of topic or even controversial topic, and they'll be kind of willing to freely just kind of dive into any intellectual exercise, right, and discuss things. But that's not always going to be the case. You will have NTs that will want to either be they'll be cautious about wandering into certain topics either through experience because they just know that those are dangerous topics to get into, as she's kind of alluding to, or topics where they just know that they are not ready to take a strong position on anything, and they just don't want to walk into something where they're so unprepared that they might now look bad. Um, they end up sounding kind of silly, um, etc. There's a certain pride in that, and a lot of NTs can have pride in their thinking and being intelligent and being seen as intelligent, so they don't exactly want to wander into stuff they're not ready to wander into. So an ILE doesn't necessarily have to be that jolly, happy-go-lucky type that just dives into any conversation without concern for the consequences of being in that kind of a conversation. So that's kind of how I took it.
But things like the death penalty, I don't have like a strong stance on that. I'm not like, both sides, I can see where they're coming from, and I just don't feel like either side really affects, like, does it affect society all that much, whether or not you're pro or not pro death penalty.
Also, I don't recall if she mentioned what state she lives in and where she's at. I don't recall if she brought it up, but I get the impression that she may come from the Midwest, states that, well, actually, no, I think she said she was Colorado. I think she said she was Colorado. So yeah, central part of the country. And it's a part of the country that you can run into a lot more of conservative types, religious types, where you have to be cautious, let's say, about how strong your stance is on religion, on death penalty, on crime, on abortion, on guns, and different topics like that. So it may be a cultural thing for her to be aware, to be cautious, and make sure to be prepared with her arguments if she ends up wandering into one of those conversations out in that part of the country. It's not quite the same thing as being out in New York or California or some other major cities that are potentially very liberal, even though Colorado has a lot of liberal areas to it.
Or anti, and I haven't seen something super compelling about it. There are other things like gun control. That's something that you
there we go.
Just guns and joke, pro gun, anti gun. Like, that's something that I can take a stance on, because I've grown up in a rural area, and
See?
When I was 10,
Rural area.
my dad made sure I got a gun from Walmart, or a BB gun. And my dad made sure to train me on gun safety. Like, I know a good amount about that subject. Abortion, I know a good amount about that subject. But I don't feel like I have the full grasp of something like religion or the death penalty in order to make a stance. But I would have to look.
See, so she's talking about, she's using the word feeling. I don't feel, but remember, a lot of people can use feeling and thinking kind of interchangeably. They could say I don't think, or they could say I don't feel, and it's interchangeable. Um, but she's kind of having what I guess a friend of mine would say intellectual integrity. She wants to be sure that she knows what she's talking about. She understands the arguments and she has thought it through before she finds herself in a possible challenging debate or discussion. Um, so that's more of a cultural thing. At least, again, that's how I'm interpreting that. So some people might have seen that and might have thought that they're seeing more of an FI thing going on.
There's just religion is too broad, and the death penalty is too 50-50.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay. Let me see. So what qualities does a topic or a field have to have for you to want to look into it more?
Oh, that's really hard because there's so many interesting ones.
So many
I tend
interesting
to
ones.
like going more theoretical than application, so I'm better at biology than I am at chemistry.
Theory. So
And I
I
think
just
it's
heard
just because it
Annie and
interacts
thinking.
with my worldview just a little bit more than chemistry does. It's just like you're just sitting down and it's like, it's I don't want to say it, but like grunt work, it's just you sitting down and you're just doing it, you're solving a small puzzle, but it's not going to have an impact.
Sounds like she doesn't care for the day-to-day stuff, the
in
very more sensory, down-to-earth
It's not
stuff
as
you got to do.
interesting. But anything that kind of interacts with that, broadening my viewpoints, that's something that I like to look into. So while I might not enjoy chess, I'll enjoy anything, like any kind of game that involves a story or media. I'm really into stories and story making,
creativity,
cinematography, stuff like that.
Now cinematography.
I just wanted to very quickly ask you to
so wide range of interests.
Why biology is more theoretical and less, say, practical.
Oh God, I was wondering that
chemistry,
same question.
Because I would have assumed almost the other way around, because we know one is further towards the abstract and one's actually further towards the, I don't know, what makes you say that? That's intrigued me.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. I haven't well, I guess no, well, actually no, because I've taken chemistry classes and I've taken biology classes, and with biology, you're going over a ton of really big concepts. Even microbiology goes over a ton of really big concepts about how you work. And I know that chemistry goes over some of those concepts, but it's also just like there's more math in chemistry than there is in biology just as a subject. So even in the chemistry class, you're going over electron configuration and the stoichiometry and stuff like that. Like that's all in the chemistry lecture and not just in the lab. Well, in biology, you might deal with Hardy Weinberg, but that's basic. I don't know if percentages have ever come up, but it's more about the ideas of it and
like Hardy
the concepts rather than chemistry, which is
I see. Okay, thank you. That makes more sense to me, because I will say that I'm a very theoretical person, as people tend to appreciate. But when I was at school, I actually preferred biology to chemistry. I may think, why? Because I actually, even more than chemistry, I actually preferred physics. So chemistry, it wasn't necessarily what I found. It was like, secondary school, it wasn't like university, of course. But what I found was that chemistry was very sort of nitty gritty in calculations of moles and that sort of stuff. Whereas when it came to biology, it was more, well, you either dissecting something or you're finding out about a certain organelle, and it just comes to life a bit more. So I guess,
yeah,
right there.
really, you could probably argue either way, what's more theoretical, what's not theoretical. Bottom line is like you're splitting hairs on whether you like one hard science, a pure science, versus another, right? We're splitting hairs here on this one. But what um, is interesting to me, the point Jack made there, was that in biology, you feel like you are capable of exploring more and exploring concepts without the hard, rigid discipline of chemistry and physics that have a lot of mathematics to them, that there is a certain amount of just cold heart, do the work, do the math, and you get to an exact kind of answer. It feels less playful and more like you need to discipline yourself to do the thing. That discipline might be more applicable to maybe somebody who's some of the STs or LSEs or some other types like that that are a little bit better at disciplining and are not as interested necessarily in having a more exploring, curious, creative mind that wants to open different possibilities, right? That's kind of how I would take the point that Jack was saying there. Um, but either way, I mean, we're still debating between very, very pure sciences here. It's very NT-ish territory, and doing it for NETI-ish kind of reasons.
Makes more sense to me. Okay. So it's not a theoretical practical thing. It sounds to me. It's more like one gets very sort of nitty gritty and almost doesn't really connect. Whereas biology, there are lots of ideas and concepts to deal with which are interesting, like
Lots of
which
ideas
are
and
actually
concepts
quite
to play with.
complicated processes going on. And there's something. So, what about when you were younger? Did you do physics as well? Did you do physics at school?
Yeah, I did physics with my dad as a math.
So, again, to not make this go on too long, but notice that about 13 minutes in, and we have seen a very strong dose of any lots of different subjects that she's interested in, lots of things she wants to do. We've seen some good usage of TE because she's rather aware of different career paths, how they work, where they're going to go, um, how these things kind of work. She's looked into it. She's acquiring data and knowledge and information and understanding it. The TI is the part that is a little bit more difficult to suss out, but that makes sense because it is a creative function for her, I think, if she's an ILE. And in that creative position, it's in the position of caution. It's a cautious position. It's not bold. It doesn't always jump out at you. It's there to support the NE. So the NE we're seeing is very bold. It's all over the place. Um, Getting a bit of TE also in a demonstrative function, it should be bold. And we're getting kind of a little TI is sort of creeping out through underneath all of this, which again makes sense for a cautious position. 13 minutes in, that's the majority of what we've seen. Um, really haven't seen much of anything else in any sort of significant way. Now, I did see, in my opinion, SE was kind of not valued. It was just kind of hidden, as I said before, about not seeking glory things, looking for jobs that it's not competitive to get to. Um, and I never saw SE really ever pop up throughout this. At some point, she will talk about, actually, maybe we'll find it, but she does talk about impressing some friends or trying to have a good time with some friends, showing off some FE. Um, and FI doesn't really show up much. It gets a little drowned and confused because, again, her particular cultural upbringing, but it's really not well seen. So I think that one of the things to always do is pay attention to the things that jump out at you at the beginning, the things that are very front loaded. I'm going to call it kind of a military term. but it's front loaded. You see a lot of NETETI, very NT-ish kind of behavior and interest and stuff going on from the front, from the early onset of things. Sometimes in these kind of interviews, the longer it goes on, the more confusing it can become. And you actually get thrown off because you start uncovering more things. It's kind of a situation where more can be a problem. Sometimes digging too deep can make you get more confused because now you start micro analyzing every little thing that you heard them say and do, and you get even more crazy. Whereas you might have figured out her type within the first few minutes and your gut reaction might have been right. So something to consider. Let me see where we're at over here. Let's jump ahead.
Not going into politics. That's one thing. That doesn't really impact anything good anyway. Politicians are useless, but standard belief. I know. Ooh, controversial.
No. It's fine. But it's a very. I want to ask you about that later, but please continue.
Okay. Yeah, but that's why I'm not going into the government. But being
except
able
you want to join the
to
military, girl, and that's a lot of government.
psychiatry and help people who people don't want to help. They don't want to see another side to these people. They don't want to believe that a criminal could be a good person. And I think that there's a lot that people can improve on in their lives, and that they can't, while this was a big thing that they did, that doesn't mean that their life is over.
Yeah. And that right there was where she was looking textbook Delta Quadra, very much NFP-ish values. So at this point, right then and there, you might start going, uh-oh, change directions. We have a Delta on our hands. But remember everything you saw in the beginning. Remember that you saw a lot of that stuff early on. So this is one of those moments where you start digging a little deeper, and sometimes you end up kind of going astray in the typing process because these kind of little details pop up and now you're confused. She has demonstrated a certain sensitivity and awareness towards political issues, especially difficult political issues. She's shown a lot of that, which is more than likely a product of her cultural background. The family environment that she came from, they probably talk about these issues a lot. They're probably interested in it. At some point, she talks about military and mentions that I believe her dad was military and has a lot of other military people around her. So it's not unlikely that a lot of these former military types of people would be politically interested or politically aware, and they discuss these kinds of things a lot. And so she may be picking up on those values and intellectual topics. She knows that they're interesting topics. Now, even though she brought all this up, she did not demonstrate this overwhelming desire to work with this minority group that she's had forever or anything like that. She spent a lot of the time early on talking about all these sciences and different things that she likes and everything else she wants to do. It's just a lot of any flying all over the place and a lot of thinking going on. You can't assume that the NTs don't have a heart and that they don't have feelings about things, or things that at least sound or seem like they feel passionately about something.
Thank you. That's helpful. So then I'll segue that towards the politicians tend to be useless idea. So that's, but I think you kind of answered that already. I think it's the impact sounds to me like it has to be a more practical impact, and it suggests to me also that practical impact is something which is to be exercised more on the one-to-one, on getting to know people and helping those people who are often perhaps forgotten or overlooked because in prison they're kind of the whole point is that they're meant to be overlooked and out of the way, that you're going to actually help them to discover other parts of themselves and improve themselves in some way. Is that, am I on the right track?
Yeah, you're on the right track. Largely, I think governments just make things more bureaucratic, and
cutting her off there. A funny note: Jack is obviously asking now about Delta style questions, Delta questions. He's clearly digging for that. Earlier in the interview, she used the word feel. I feel this way about biology or about this or that or whatever. I don't feel comfortable arguing about religion or whatever if I'm not comfortable on the topic, etc. She used the word feeling. It stands out to me that now when she's starting to demonstrate possible strong feeling tones about a topic like prison, now she uses the word I think. It Do I have a clear explanation as to why that is? No, but I find that interesting, that sudden switch, that reversal here.
They have large sweeping promises, and their programs tend to force people to fall between the cracks or catch them like little like flies with honey. They just stay there and they're stuck, and they can't really do anything about that. And that's not,
And she's very right about it. So it's a common ongoing problem. I'm curious as to why she got into this particular thing in the first place, like why prison inmates and so on. I don't recall her giving any specifics on why, but it might have been, I can't help but wonder if it's more personal. She knows some people who maybe were in prison or something like that. Possible. It's just it's an unusual place to kind of dedicate your energy towards. And I was also going to mention she's from Colorado or in Colorado or whatever. Colorado is a military state, and it's one that is often a political hotbed for all kinds of ideas and radical concepts. There's a lot of very liberal politics that goes on over there, but you still have a lot of very rural areas too where things can be very conservative. So it's an area where you're kind of at the crossroads between a lot of these major political issues. So it's more food for thought as to why this kind of stuff would be on her mind.
I think that mediocrity is something to look forward to, and that's what the government tends to want.
Why does socionics have its tenterhooks in you? Why is that something you can't quite get rid of?
Because like the system is really interesting. How the different pieces kind of slot together, and obviously there's so many differences because there's socionics and then there's Enneagram, and we're gonna forget MBTI for like 100 minutes, and but Enneagram and socionics are probably the two main ones, and they just have so many correlations, and it just like itches my need to solve a puzzle, but like not a puzzle, but like a grand puzzle, and it seems like a pretty cool puzzle to try and solve how the functions
puzzle
work,
solving, grand
how that
puzzle
presents
solving.
in people,
how
all of
NT-ish.
that. That's fascinated me more and more, and I've always been fascinated by personality and trying to figure out like animal personality, how different, like horses, they can be high energy, middle energy, or low energy, and that affects everything that they do. So I was in a horse program for 6 years. Or wolves. There's a wolf sanctuary by me. They're completely different from dogs. I mean, they are. They're similar. They're extremely similar, but there's a ton of small little details that make it interesting. People, the fact that we're the only animals that can properly throw and not just.
Do you get the certain theme or vibe here that it's very intellectual, it's very in your head, processing ideas about animals, wolves, horses, now it's people. She's trying to apply different mental models to things to make sense of them. This sounds more likely to be a very, again, NT-ish kind of thing to do. Uh, you're not hearing the desire for more practical approach to things and application necessarily. Um, so it kind of has this feel of an alpha quadra NT type that is kind of exploring the world. They're exploring through things. Um, and this, once again, we're talking about this even 40 something minutes into it. You see so much of this pop up throughout the whole interview that it continues to sort of reinforce the idea that you're likely dealing with some sort of NT alpha type. And given the heavy NE usage, more likely an ILE.
Lob and lose your balance, like how monkeys do it. Like there's a ton of little interesting details that kind of slot themselves in, and
Back to
I don't know. I
slotting
just
things.
find it cool. I find it fascinating.
You've mentioned it a couple of times, the slotting
Well, now
themselves
he's pointing
in,
it out.
and this idea of a sort of a grand structure. Now, I'm interested in this point, and I'm going to be more open now and transparent about this because, on the one hand, I'm exploring Delta Quadrant. On the other hand, I keep on getting these words from you which suggest more introverted logic. So I'm interested in exploring
Yeah.
that in terms of I haven't yet. You've said those things to me. I'm not yet sure if I've seen how it all fits
Yeah.
together in terms of this need to sort of slot
See.
things together to make sort of a coherent sense and have that sort of
And this is kind
worldview
of
and sort
just
of
her word usage and so on is a little bit, can throw you off. And that's going to happen a lot with when you're dealing with an interview and real people. Let's see where she goes here, I believe. Let's see.
Kind of this premium, this tilapia slopping around in my head. I really want to know.
I really
Right.
want to know.
Okay. And now that's interesting because I also know, right? You've clearly had some very strong values in your upbringing, right? Volunteering, very strong. Your dad taught. Yeah, your dad has to have a very keen interest in the values you're going to hold to actually train a child to hold a gun. And fair enough, in parts of America that makes a lot of sense. But the position, right? I'm going to make sure
Well, we're a
you
bunch
are
of
going to be
cowboys.
trained and know how to handle a gun. That is not the most common thing. It suggests someone who really wants to make sure you know what you're doing and you got some clear values to
Mm-hmm.
guide you through life.
So at this point,
So
Jack has kind of zeroed in on the strong cultural values and upbringing. Uh, and that now starts to form part of the narrative to make sense of why she seems to have strong interest in politics, maybe the prison system, and a few other things that she's doing.
Yeah.
Same time, it's interesting how if someone else is very clearly awkward in their social interactions, to the point where they're going to embarrass themselves later, there's a certain, I call it a judgment, but almost a sort of a feeling for them, as it were, as in, oh, you're going to feel very embarrassed about that later. And it's cringy for you to see, which I think is also interesting in that respect. Like there's quite a strong position in terms of sociologics ethics to take. So that's leading me more towards ILE. And the fact that I'm getting both, clearly your extroverted logic is, seems to me to be quite strong.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that you said also that, you kind of want to get your facts correct. You're quite careful and judicious about that. And then maybe that's because of your values. Maybe it's part of the way you're raised, or maybe it's because of the university.
So yeah, that's probably about it. So there again, Jack is trying to create the narrative that puts everything kind of together, a sensible argument. And I think he's right. I think Jack did it. He did it well. I think he's on the money there. I would put her as an ILE. That's kind of how I saw her in the first few minutes. And even when it's done, I'm still kind of sticking with ILE. I'm agreeing with Jack on that one. And the cultural upbringing makes sense for all of her other strong views on things. And not every ILE is going to appear completely stupid on social feeling kinds of things. They can kind of get by pretty well with their usage of FE as a mobilizing function. Um, so bear in mind at the end of all this, you saw a lot of NE, a lot of thinking stuff, TI and TE going on, good, healthy amounts of both. Um, so trust your instincts on that and stick with it. ILE. And never did she really bring up anything that really struck you hard as FI stuff. So anyway, I think that's more than enough on this one. It's pretty long. Good job to Jack. This one was a kind of a more difficult typing session. Because she was not your stereotypical clear-cut obvious ILE. And again, sometimes the words that people use to describe things can be a little bit difficult and challenging to get through. So I thought Jack did a good job sussing through all that stuff. In fact, I'd say he did a great job sussing through all that stuff. It was not easy to do. So my hat's off to him on that one. So anyway, we'll see what happens on the follow-up. Let me know what you all think. And where you were all at when you saw this. All right, on to the next one.